I never thought my own children would circle around me like vultures waiting for a carcass. But here I am, 61 years old, my body rotting from cancer, and instead of hands to hold me in my final days, I hear whispers about money, land, and how quickly I'll die. My name is Margaret, and this is the story of how a mother's love was repaid with betrayal sharper than any knife. The night was heavy with silence, except for the ticking of the antique clock in the living room. I sat in my armchair, a blanket pulled around my frail shoulders. My bones ached, and every breath reminded me of the cancer gnawing at my insides. I should have been resting, but the voices from the next room froze me in place. It was my eldest son, Richard. His voice always carried authority, a certain arrogance. I used to be proud of that strength. Tonight, it felt like venom dripping through the air. "She can't last much longer," Richard muttered, his tone matter-of-fact. A pause. Then the sharp nasal laugh of his wife, Denise. "Well, let's just hope she signs those transfer papers before she croaks. I'm not spending another month in this drafty old mausoleum without knowing it's ours." My fingers clutched the blanket tighter. Transfer papers? What were they talking about? Then came the second voice, my middle son, Thomas. He sounded annoyed. "You think she'll just hand everything over? She's stubborn as hell. Always has been. She still thinks this place belongs to her precious family." His wife Lillian sneered loudly enough for me to hear. "Family? Please. She doesn't care about anyone but herself. Always acting like a martyr because she raised you alone. I swear, if she wasn't sitting on millions, I'd have left this circus years ago." Millions. So that's all I was to them. A number in a bank account. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as though the cancer itself was pressing harder, suffocating me. And then, the youngest, my sweet David, the one I believed still had a heart. But his words cut me the deepest. "Look, I don't care what we have to do. I need my share. The kids' school, the mortgage. I'm drowning here. If Mom really loved us, she'd make it easier." His wife Sandra chimed in coldly. "Then make her love you less. Push her. Guilt her. Whatever it takes. She won't be around much longer." The room spun. Was this real? Were these truly my sons, the boys I had fed, clothed, carried on my back when I had nothing? I pressed a trembling hand over my mouth to keep from crying out. As their voices faded into muffled plodding, my mind drifted back. Memories, uninvited, clawed their way to the surface. Richard as a baby, his tiny fist gripping my finger. I had been barely 20, abandoned by my husband for months at a time, but holding that boy had felt like holding the world. Thomas, always sickly as a child, clinging to my dress as I rushed between jobs, cleaning houses by day, sewing late into the night, just to afford his medicine. David, my last light. The child who used to run into my arms shouting, "Mama, I'll take care of you one day." His laughter had been my lullaby. Where had those boys gone? When had they turned into these cold, greedy men who spoke of me like I was already dead? Tears stung my eyes, but I bit them back. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. "Not yet," I whispered to the shadows. "Not one of you deserves this house. Not one of you deserves my love anymore." But a mother's heart, oh, it betrays itself. Even as anger rose in me, there was an ache, a whisper. Maybe they're just stressed. Maybe they don't mean it. That hope, foolish as it was, clung to me like a disease even worse than cancer. The next morning, Denise stormed into my room without knocking. Her perfume was choking, sharp as her words. "You need to sign these, Margaret," she said, slapping a stack of papers on my nightstand. I blinked at her. "What is this?" "Property transfer. Nothing major. Just making sure the estate doesn't get tangled in legal nonsense after you, you know?" She waved her manicured hand in the air, as if saying after you die was too much effort. I tried to sit up straighter, my back protesting. "I'm not signing anything." Her lips curled into a smirk. "You're sick. You're old. Why drag this out? Don't you want to make things easier for your sons?" I studied her face, searching for a hint of compassion. There was none. Just greed glinting in her eyes. "No," I said firmly, my voice steadier than I felt. Her smile disappeared. "Suit yourself, but don't expect anyone to keep running around after you when you're too weak to move." And with that, she swept out, leaving the papers behind like a curse on my nightstand. I stared at them for a long time. Each page looked like a chain waiting to lock me in my grave. I thought, so this is how it begins. That night I came down to the dining room. I shouldn't have bothered. The long oak table, polished and shining, once held laughter, arguments, and my boy's hungry hands reaching for seconds. Tonight, it was filled with whispers and cold shoulders. I sat at the head, coughing into a napkin. Not one of them asked if I was okay. Instead, Sandra rolled her eyes. God, do you have to do that at the table? It's disgusting. David said nothing. He just kept eating, avoiding my gaze. I looked at him, my baby, and wanted to scream, say something, defend me, but his silence spoke louder than cruelty. The food tasted like ash in my mouth. My stomach churned, not from the cancer, but from the realization I was already invisible to them. When I excused myself early, not one of them looked up. Back in my room, I opened the old dresser where I kept my late husband's things. My hands shook, not from weakness but from an instinct, a need to remind myself of a time before betrayal consumed this house. Inside was a wooden box, dusty and forgotten. I opened it expecting nothing but old receipts or cufflinks. Instead, I found a faded photograph. A man, not my husband, holding an infant. The back of the photo was marked with a single word, Michael. And tucked beneath it, a letter. The handwriting was shaky, hurried. If anything happens, the truth must come out. They were never yours. Forgive me. My breath caught. The room swayed. Never mine? The photograph trembled in my hands as 1,000 questions slammed into me. Who was Michael? Whose baby was he holding? And what did my husband mean by, they were never yours? I pressed the letter to my chest, the words burning into me. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stronger than despair. It was rage. I couldn't sleep. The letter's words echoed in my head. They were never yours. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my sons' faces, not as men, but as children. Richard with jam smeared across his cheeks, Thomas running barefoot in the garden, David falling asleep against my chest after crying from a nightmare. How could they not be mine? I had carried them, hadn't I? I had felt their kicks inside me, hadn't I? Or had I convinced myself of memories that weren't entirely real? The pain in my chest wasn't just the cancer. It was a deeper wound, the slow tearing of the very foundation of my life. I sat up, clutching the photograph again. The man named Michael stared back at me. Who was he? Was he their real father? Or someone else entirely? And if my husband had hidden this truth, then what else had he hidden? A cold thought slithered through my mind. If they're not my blood, then what are they to me? I hated myself for even thinking it. But the seed was planted. The following morning, I dragged myself to the kitchen. I wanted tea, just something warm to ease my aching throat. Denise was already there, her heels clicking on the tiles as she scrolled on her phone. She glanced up at me, then deliberately went back to scrolling. "Good morning," I said softly. She didn't answer. Instead, she muttered, "You know, Margaret, maybe you should start thinking about a nursing home. It's not fair to expect us to take care of you." I froze, the teacup trembling in my hand. "A nursing home? Yes," she said bluntly. "You're weak. You can't even cook or clean anymore. What's the point of you rattling around in this big house? It's selfish, really. We have our own lives." Her words cut deeper than any knife. Selfish. After everything I had given up, after the years of scraping and sacrificing, I was selfish for existing in the house I built for them. I set the teacup down carefully, my hands shaking. "Your children will watch how you treat me," I whispered. "And one day, they'll treat you the same." Denise smirked. "By then, I'll be rich enough to hire someone who actually wants the job." Her cruelty hung in the air as I turned and left the kitchen, my dignity in tatters. That afternoon, Thomas drove me to the hospital. Not out of kindness, of course. He made it clear he was doing me a favor. "Do you know how inconvenient this is for me?" he snapped as we sat in the waiting room. "I had to cancel a meeting. You think my life stops just because you're sick?" I stared at him. The son I once carried piggybacked down the street after he scraped his knee. His jaw clenched as he scrolled through his emails, barely looking at me. When the doctor called us in, he confirmed what I already knew. My cancer was spreading. The treatments weren't working. Time was running out. As I absorbed the news, I glanced at Thomas. He didn't even flinch, didn't squeeze my hand, didn't ask, "What does this mean for Mom?" Instead, his first question was, "So how much longer are we talking?" The doctor looked at him sharply, but I lowered my gaze. Shame burned through me, not for myself, but for the man my son had become. On the drive home, Thomas turned up the radio, drowning out the silence. I stared out the window, fighting back tears. Why am I still calling him my son? My 61st birthday came 2 weeks later. I had told myself not to expect much. Still, hope is a cruel thing. It creeps in no matter how many times you kill it. I dressed in a soft blue sweater, brushed my thinning hair, and waited in the living room. The cake I had asked the maid to prepare sat untouched on the table. One by one, my sons filed in. No flowers, no gifts, no warm hugs. Sandra plopped herself down on the couch, crossing her legs. "Let's cut the cake quickly. I have dinner plans." Richard glanced at his watch. "Same. I've got a client meeting." Even David, my baby, muttered something about errands. We stood around the cake. I made a wish, though my voice cracked on the inside. "God, if I can't have love, then at least give me strength." When I looked up, they were already slicing the cake themselves, chatting among each other, barely noticing me. I excused myself and went upstairs, alone. That night, I lit a candle by myself and whispered, "Happy birthday, Margaret." The tears wouldn't stop. Every cruelty, every cold word, every dismissal only pushed me closer to the truth the letter hinted at. They weren't mine. Deep inside, I began to believe it. No mother could raise children with so much love and still be treated like this, unless fate itself had been playing a trick on her. I lay awake, the photograph of Michael on my nightstand. His eyes seemed to follow me, accusing, questioning. Why had my husband lied? Why had he hidden this? And why now, at the end of my life, was the truth clawing its way into the light? One night, I whispered into the darkness, "If you're not mine, then who am I to you? And if you're not mine, then maybe I owe you nothing." The thought terrified me, but it also gave me the first taste of power. Because if these men weren't my sons, then maybe, just maybe, I could finally be free of them. It happened late one evening. I went to my bedside drawer for my pain medication, only to find the bottle empty. My heart sank. I knew I had at least a week's worth left. I rang the bell for Sandra, who had been tasked, against my will, with organizing my prescriptions. She sauntered in, arms crossed. "My pills are gone," I said, my voice trembling. She shrugged. "You must have miscounted." "No, I'm sure." "Then maybe you took too many," she interrupted coldly. "Not my problem." I stared at her, disbelief flooding me. You took them?" She smirked, not even bothering to hide her cruelty. "Maybe you don't need them. A little pain might remind you to hurry up and sign those papers." My blood boiled, but my body was too weak to fight. I gripped the blanket, forcing myself not to scream. "Someday," I whispered hoarsely, "you'll beg for mercy, and I won't give it." Sandra's smirk faded for a moment, then she turned and left, leaving me gasping in agony. That night, I cried silently into my pillow. Not from the pain of the cancer, but from the realization that my own children's wives were willing to torture me for greed. The next week, a knock came at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when the maid announced Mr. Harris, I frowned. Mr. Harris was an old neighbor from decades ago. I hadn't seen him in years. His hair was gray, his back slightly bent, but his eyes were sharp. "I heard you weren't well," he said, taking my frail hand in his. "I wanted to see you before." His voice trailed off. We sat in the parlor sipping tea. At first we exchanged small talk, but then his expression turned serious. "Margaret," he said quietly, "do you ever wonder why your husband was gone so often back then?" My chest tightened. Of course, he claimed it was work. Business trips, always business. Mr. Harris shook his head. "Not always. There were rumors, whispers that he had another life. Another woman, maybe more than one." The room tilted. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my cup. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice brittle. He looked at me with pity. "Because you deserve to know the truth before it's too late." I thought of the letter, the photograph, the words. They were never yours. And I realized, maybe the rumors weren't rumors after all. That night, I gathered the strength to face my sons. I called them into the living room, my voice firm despite the sickness rattling in my chest. I need to speak with you all, I said. They came reluctantly, their wives trailing behind like shadows. I've been thinking about the future, I began. About the estate. Their eyes lit up, too quickly, too greedily. Richard leaned forward. So you're ready to sign? Thomas smirked. Finally seeing reason? David stayed silent, but his jaw was tight. I shook my head slowly. No, I just wanted to remind you, this is still my house, my money, my decision. Their faces darkened. Denise scoffed. For now. Lillian whispered something to Thomas that made him chuckle. Sandra folded her arms. Stop playing games, Margaret. You don't have long. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. My hands trembled, but I kept my voice steady. You may think you know everything, but there are truths in this family you can't even imagine. They looked at me, confused. I let the silence hang in the air before dismissing them. It was the first time in weeks I felt a spark of control. That night I couldn't shake Mr. Harris's words. I dug deeper into my husband's old things. I found receipts for hotels, restaurants, and jewelry I had never received. Dates that lined up with his business trips. Each slip of paper was a dagger. How blind I had been. How loyal. I remembered the nights I waited for him, rocking the babies in my arms, telling myself he was working hard for us. All the while he had been living another life, or perhaps planting another family. The thought sickened me, but worse than the betrayal of a husband was the creeping possibility that the children I had poured my soul into weren't even mine. I clutched my chest, whispering to the empty room, God, give me strength. If this is true, if my life has been a lie, then let me be the one to expose it, not them. Days passed. My body grew weaker, but my mind sharpened with a strange, burning clarity. The pieces were coming together. The letter, the photo, the receipts, Mr. Harris's warning. My husband's betrayals had spilled into my children, shaping the cruel creatures they had become. But I would not leave this world blind. One evening, after enduring another dinner of cold silence and sharper words, I rose slowly from my chair. I have an announcement, I said. My voice wavered, but the determination behind it was steel. They all turned, impatient, irritated. I want a DNA test, I declared, for all three of you. The room exploded. What? Richard barked. Are you insane? Thomas snapped. David paled, his wife gripping his arm. You heard me, I said, standing taller than I had in months. If you want my estate so badly, then prove you are truly my sons. Their wives erupted in protests, their voices overlapping in fury. But I only stared at my sons, the men I had loved, raised, and now questioned. For the first time in years, they looked afraid. And for the first time in years, I felt powerful. The moment the words left my mouth, the house trembled with chaos. A DNA test? Richard's face turned red, his voice booming. Have you completely lost your mind? Thomas slammed his palm against the table. Do you know what you're saying? You're accusing your own children of being strangers. David looked stricken, but it was Sandra who hissed. This is disgusting, Margaret. How dare you humiliate your family like this? I stood my ground, though my knees quivered under the weight of their fury. If you want my estate, if you want my signature, then you'll give me this. Prove who you are. Denise scoffed. She's sick, delusional. This is the cancer talking. Lillian chimed in, her voice dripping venom. Or maybe she just wants attention. Isn't that what it's always been about, Margaret? Poor little widow, raising 3 boys all alone. Always needing sympathy. Their words struck me like lashes, but I refused to flinch. Enough, I said. My voice cut through the room like a blade. You'll take the test, or you'll get nothing. For the first time, silence fell, the kind of silence that revealed fear hiding beneath anger. That night, I heard them again. Whispering outside my bedroom door, thinking I was too weak, too deaf to catch their words. She's bluffing, Richard muttered. She's too sick to follow through. Thomas replied, What if she's not? What if she really changes the will? Sandra hissed, Then we stop her. We keep her too weak to act. No lawyer, no test, nothing. She can't do anything if she can't leave this bed. A lump rose in my throat. They were planning to trap me in my own body. I clenched my fists under the blanket. You think I'm powerless. You think I'll just fade quietly, but you don't know me at all. The next morning, my suspicions became reality. My breakfast tray arrived without my usual fruit, without the tea that soothed my throat. Just dry toast and lukewarm water. I asked about my medication. Sandra shrugged. Pharmacy was out. A lie. By afternoon, my strength waned. I could barely stand. Denise passed by my room, glancing in. "You look awful," she said with a smirk. "Maybe you should just stay in bed from now on." The cruelty was deliberate. They were trying to weaken me, silence me, starve me into submission. But as I lay there, my body betraying me, my mind sharpened. If they wanted war, I would give it to them, quietly, patiently, on my terms. That evening, the maid, Maria, slipped into my room. She had worked in this house for over a decade, quietly, faithfully, often ignored by the family. Her eyes brimmed with concern as she whispered, "Madam, I've seen what they are doing. Withholding food, hiding your medicine. It's not right." My throat tightened. I knew it. I knew they wouldn't stop. Maria nodded gravely. Then, to my surprise, she placed a small bundle on my nightstand. "I saved some of your pills. I knew they'd try something like this." Tears stung my eyes. For weeks I had felt utterly alone. But here was someone who still saw me as human. I grasped her hand. "Maria, listen to me. Whatever happens, don't let them scare you. I need your help. I need a lawyer." She hesitated, glancing at the door. "It's dangerous, madam. They're watching everything." "I know," I said, my voice low but steady. "But if I'm going to die, it won't be as their prisoner." For the first time in weeks, hope flickered inside me. The next day, I made my move. When Denise barged into my room to lecture me about causing trouble, I listened quietly, nodding as if I agreed. What she didn't know was that beneath my blanket, in my frail hand, I held a small digital recorder Maria had smuggled to me. Every word of her venom, about how I was a burden, about how I should just sign and die, was captured. When she left, I pressed stop and clutched the recorder like a weapon. They thought I was powerless. But power comes in many forms. Sometimes it hides in patience, sometimes in secrets. And for the first time I realized I wasn't just waiting to die. I was preparing for revenge. I woke one morning to find the photograph of Michael, the man from the letter, smashed on the floor. The glass glittered like tiny knives across the rug. My heart stopped. I always kept it tucked safely in my drawer. Someone had gone through my things. I called out, my voice weak but sharp. "Who touched my drawer?" No answer. Only the distant echo of laughter downstairs. I knelt slowly, my knees screaming, and picked up the photograph. The edges cut my finger, drawing a thin line of blood. That drop of blood on Michael's faded face felt symbolic. A cruel reminder, maybe even a warning. Someone knew I had secrets. Someone wanted me to stop digging. But instead of fear, anger surged in me. You can break the glass, but you can't erase the truth. At dinner that night, Lillian leaned over her wine glass, smirking. "So, Margaret, have you thought about which nursing home you'd prefer? I hear the one across town does wonders for people who forget reality." Her words dripped with mockery, and the others chuckled. Even David allowed a half smile before lowering his eyes. I stabbed at my food, refusing to look at them, but my silence only encouraged their cruelty. Denise added, "We could always sell this place and use the money to pay for your care. I mean, it's not like you'll need the master bedroom much longer." Their laughter echoed around the table, bouncing off the walls that once heard my children's innocent giggles. I forced a smile, though my insides trembled. "Laugh while you can. You'll choke on those words one day." The table went quiet for a heartbeat before Sandra sneered, "Careful, Margaret. Empty threats make you sound senile." But their eyes, they flickered. They weren't as fearless as they pretended. 2 days later, Maria helped me slip a note into the hand of an old lawyer I trusted, Mr. Caldwell. He came under the pretense of checking the house's deed, but in reality he came for me. We met in my room, the door locked. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "I don't have much time," I whispered. "They're watching me, listening, but I need protection." He nodded gravely. "You suspect they'll try to force you to sign?" "They already have," I said, my voice trembling. "And worse, they're starving me, hiding my medicine." His jaw tightened. "Margaret, this is elder abuse, criminal, you can press charges." I shook my head. "Not yet. I need proof. I need them to reveal themselves fully, and I need the DNA test. At that, his brow furrowed. DNA test? I showed him the letter, the photograph. His eyes widened as he read. This changes everything, he murmured. If this is true, your entire estate plan could shift. Exactly, I said. That's why I need it kept secret. No one can know until the time is right. He agreed, slipping the papers into his briefcase. Don't worry, Margaret. When the moment comes, we'll strike. For the first time in months, I felt like I had a weapon that wasn't just my fading voice. That evening, Richard stormed into my room. His face was twisted with fury, his fists clenched. What the hell are you doing bringing lawyers here? He roared. Are you trying to cheat us out of what's ours? I held my ground, though my heart hammered. What's yours? Nothing is yours until I say so. His eyes blazed. We've waited long enough. You're dying. Why can't you just make this easy? I met his gaze, steady, because I don't reward vultures. For a moment I thought he might strike me. His hand twitched, his jaw clenched. But instead he turned and punched the wall, the sound reverberating through the house. You'll regret this, he spat, before storming out. My hands shook, but inside something strange stirred. Not fear. Not anymore. It was resolve. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across my blanket. I thought of my life, the sacrifices, the loneliness, the laughter that once filled this house, now replaced with venom. I thought of the letter. Of Michael. Of the possibility that everything I had believed was a lie. But more than anything, I thought of my sons' faces at dinner, when I told them they would one day choke on their laughter. They had looked afraid. Just for a moment. And that fear was enough to remind me I wasn't beaten yet. I whispered to the night, my voice trembling but fierce. They think they can break me, but I'll die on my own terms, and when I go, I'll take their greed with me. The cancer was eating my body, but revenge was feeding my soul. The next morning I reached for my pills and found the bottles empty. Every single one. Panic surged. I knew I had refilled them only last week. I hobbled down the hall, clutching the banister. Where are my pills? Chandra appeared, her face a mask of false innocence. Oh, did you misplace them again? You really should keep better track. My vision blurred. Not just from sickness but from rage. You took them, I whispered. She leaned close, her perfume choking me. And what if I did? What will you do about it? Her smile was venom. I felt weak, dizzy. But inside, a vow took shape. I'll find another way to survive you, Sandra. And when the time comes, you'll wish you'd left me my medicine. I lay in bed that night, body aching, mind whirling. And then, as always, memory came unbidden. I was 27 again, holding a feverish David in my arms. The doctor's bill had been more than I could afford, but I had pawned my wedding ring to pay for it. He had looked up at me with those big, trusting eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Mama." That memory burned now. That son, the one I nearly died saving, couldn't even spare me my pills. Tears soaked my pillow. Not just from sorrow, but from betrayal, so deep it was cutting into my very bones. How do children forget a mother's sacrifices so easily? How do they erase the hands that fed them? The next evening, Denise appeared at my door with a tray of soup. Thought you might be hungry, she said sweetly, though her eyes gleamed. I stared at the bowl. Steam rose in delicate spirals, but my instincts screamed. Eat, she urged. You need your strength. Her voice was sugar but too polished, too deliberate. I dipped the spoon, lifted it halfway to my lips, then stopped. I set it back down. You first, I said. Her smile faltered. I'm not hungry. Then neither am I. The silence between us was thick. Finally, she snatched the tray and left without another word. My hands trembled, but not from weakness. From certainty. They weren't just waiting for me to die, they were trying to hurry it along. Maria slipped into my room later that night. They're planning something worse, she whispered, eyes darting toward the door. I heard Denise telling Sandra they'll get her to sign the papers one way or another. My chest tightened, but then Maria placed a small black device in my hand. A voice recorder. Keep it close, she urged. Record everything. One day, the truth will matter. I clutched it like a lifeline. This tiny machine could be my shield, my sword, proof of their cruelty. I hid it beneath my pillow, my heart hammering with both fear and hope. For the first time, I wasn't just enduring, I was gathering ammunition. The days that followed were a blur of small battles. Lillian snapped at me for leaving a blanket on the couch. Richard accused me of hoarding money. Sandra sneered that my cancer was karma. Each word, each cruelty I endured in silence, but the recorder captured it all. Their venom, their greed, their impatience for my death. At night, I replayed the muffled voices, the threats, the insults. Each recording was a nail in the coffin they thought they were building for me, but in truth, it was becoming a coffin for their own ambitions. One evening, as thunder rolled outside, I sat in the dark, whispering to myself, "They think I'm dying. They think I'm powerless, but the storm is coming, and when it breaks, they won't see me as weak. They'll see me as the reckoning." The storm outside roared louder, as if the heavens themselves agreed. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I was dozing in my chair when Richard stormed in, followed by Denise and Sandra. In Richard's hand was a thick stack of papers. "Sign these," he barked. I blinked, heart racing. "What are they?" "Just routine transfers," Sandra said sweetly, her eyes glinting. "For efficiency." They laid the papers before me, slid a pen into my trembling hand. My fingers hovered. Property deeds, bank authorizations, my life's work reduced to ink and greed. "Sign, mother," Richard growled. "Do it now." I looked up at him, my son, the child I had once carried on my hip while cooking dinner with one hand, and I saw nothing but a stranger. Slowly I set the pen down. "No." The word was soft, but it cracked the air like a whip. Richard slammed his fist onto the table. Denise gasped, Sandra hissed. "You'll regret this," he spat. But I had already decided, I would rather die penniless than sign away my dignity. That evening, they retaliated. I heard the click of the thermostat being lowered. Within hours the house grew colder, the air biting against my thin skin. I shivered under my blanket, my bones aching. The cancer already left me weak, but the chill made every breath harder. Downstairs, laughter rose, warm, cool, careless. I curled tighter beneath the quilt, whispering through chattering teeth, "You can freeze my body, but not my will." I clutched the recorder to my chest, knowing it was catching every cruel word, every threat, every proof of what they truly were. Let them laugh. One day soon, their laughter would be used against them. The next morning, Maria slipped into my room, cheeks flushed with urgency. "They're talking about sending you to a facility," she whispered, "but not a proper one, somewhere cheap, out of sight." My heart clenched. An image flashed, me, dumped in some bleak, forgotten place, stripped of everything familiar. "Did they say when?" I asked. "Soon," she said. "Before you get the chance to change the will." I sat in silence, anger simmering beneath my ribs. They thought they could discard me like trash, erase me from my own home. But the truth was clear now. The time for silence was almost over. Later that day, I stood before the mirror in my room. The woman staring back was frail, her skin pale, hair thinned. But in her eyes, my eyes, burned a fire that cancer could not kill. And as I stared, memories surged, holding Richard's hand as he took his first steps, staying up nights to sew David's school costume, selling my heirloom necklace to buy Andrew a bicycle. Tears stung my eyes. I whispered to my reflection, "I gave you everything. My love, my years, my strength. And this is how you repay me." But then I straightened, wiped my tears. "You will not win, not yet, not ever." The mirror showed me my body fading. But my spirit? It was sharpening into steel. The following week, I quietly made arrangements with Mr. Caldwell. He had sent a discreet nurse to draw blood, mine and theirs. They thought it was a routine checkup, nothing more. They didn't question it. Their arrogance was my shield. As the vials of blood were sealed and slipped away, I felt a strange thrill. The truth was now in motion. Soon, I would know. Were these cruel men truly my sons? Or had I wasted my life on strangers wearing the faces of family? I whispered to myself as the door shut behind the nurse, "Whatever the truth is, it will be my weapon. My revenge begins the moment those results arrive." And deep inside, for the first time in years, I felt something stir. Hope. It was Sunday. They insisted we all attend church as a family. I went, frail and bundled in a shawl, more out of obligation than faith. But halfway through the service, Denise leaned over loud enough for nearby pews to hear. Poor Margaret, wasting away, she won't be around much longer. Lillian snickered, Sandra smirked, and even Richard chuckled under his breath. Whispers rippled around us. I felt the eyes of neighbors, pitying, curious, cruel. My cheeks burned hot. I bowed my head, hands shaking, but inside I whispered, "Mock me here, in God's house if you dare. But the day will come when it is you who kneels in shame." And though I said nothing aloud, I caught one parishioner's glance, a knowing frown, a raised brow. Maybe not everyone believed their act. Maybe someone saw the truth. 2 nights later I tried to leave my room for water. The knob wouldn't turn. I twisted harder, rattled it, but it was locked. From the outside, my chest tightened. They had locked me in like a prisoner. I banged the door with my weak fists. "Open this! Open it!" Footsteps shuffled outside. Then Sandra's voice, smooth and venomous. "Stay put, Margaret. It's safer that way." Her laughter trailed down the hall. I sank to the floor, fury boiling in my veins. My own home had become a cage, but I wasn't powerless, not anymore. I reached under my pillow, turned on the recorder, and whispered into it. "They've locked me in. If anything happens, this is proof." My voice was thin, shaky, but it was there. A record, a weapon. The next morning a doctor arrived, one I had never seen before. Brought in by Denise, he barely looked at me as he scribbled notes. "She's declining rapidly," he muttered. "Might not have more than a few months." Denise sighed dramatically. "It's such a burden. We're doing our best." A burden. That word sliced through me. I wanted to scream, to tell the doctor everything, but I saw the way he avoided my eyes, how he only listened to her. Was he bought, or simply blind? Either way, I smiled faintly and said nothing. Better to play weak. Better to let them underestimate me. Inside, though, a new thought burned. I must outlive their expectations, even if only by days. Long enough to see the test results, long enough to see their faces break. That evening, I wrote a letter. Not to my sons, not to their wives. They deserved nothing of my words. I wrote to Maria, "My dear friend," it began, my hand trembling across the page. "If I should die suddenly, know that it was not by chance. Keep the recordings. Give them to Mr. Caldwell. Let the truth be known." Tears blurred the ink as I wrote. Not from fear, but from the deep ache of realizing that the only person I could trust in this house wasn't family at all. I sealed the letter, slid it beneath my mattress, and whispered into the dark, "If blood has failed me, then loyalty will be my legacy." The phone rang the next afternoon. I answered quickly, heart pounding. It was Mr. Caldwell. His voice was low, measured. "Margaret, the results are nearly ready, a day or two at most." My breath caught. Nearly ready. The truth was within reach. As I hung up, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Outside my door, I heard Denise's voice, sharp and scheming. "We'll make her sign tomorrow, I don't care how." I clutched the recorder, my lifeline. The results were coming. Their cruelty was recorded. My resolve was steel. And as the evening sun bled across the walls, I whispered to myself, "The reckoning is close. They think they've won, but they don't know the ground beneath them is about to split." The clock ticked. Each second dragged me closer to the storm. I used to pray for mercy. Now I prayed for time. Time enough to see the results. Time enough to set my trap. That morning, Sandra barged into my room with a tray of burnt toast. She slammed it down so hard crumbs scattered across the blanket. "Eat it or starve," she hissed. I looked at her and for the first time I smiled. Her eyes narrowed. "What's so funny?" "Just thinking," I said softly, "how a woman can starve in a mansion full of food. Strange, isn't it?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. She left without another word. As the door shut, I whispered to myself, "They think I am broken, but a broken woman can still cut with her shards." Maria came late that night, slipping into my room like a ghost. "They're planning something tomorrow," she whispered. "Sandra wants Richard to bring a notary. They'll try again to force your signature." I nodded slowly. "Then we'll give them a performance." Maria frowned. "What do you mean?" I slid the recorder into her hands. "Hide this in the parlor. Let it hear every word, every threat. I'll play along, just enough." Her eyes widened with both fear and admiration. "You're not afraid?" "Terrified," I admitted. "But fear is a sharper weapon than anger, and tomorrow, I'll use it." For the first time, Maria squeezed my hand and whispered, "You're stronger than they know." Her words were a balm, and for once I almost believed her. The next day, Richard dragged me to the parlor. A notary sat stiffly at the table, pen poised, papers waiting. "Sign, Mother," Richard barked. His voice echoed through the grand room like a commandment. Denise stood behind him, smirking. Sandra loomed to my left, arms crossed. Lillian leaned on the mantel, twirling her necklace, watching like a vulture. I sat, trembling, staring at the documents. "Do you want us to beg?" Sandra sneered. "No," I whispered. "I want you to stop pretending this is about family." Richard slammed the pen in front of me. "Enough games." The recorder hidden under the cabinet caught every word, every threat, every sneer. I lifted the pen, my hand shaking. For a moment I let them believe. Let them think they had won. Then, deliberately, I let the pen fall, rolling across the floor. "I won't," I said firmly. My voice cracked, but it carried. The notary shifted uncomfortably. Richard's face twisted in rage. But the truth had already been captured, preserved in the tiny machine humming nearby. That night Maria retrieved the recorder. We sat together, huddled in my room, listening to their voices play back. "Sign, Mother!" Richard's rage thundered through the tiny speaker. Sandra's sneer hissed. "Do you want us to beg?" I closed my eyes, hearing their cruelty as if from outside myself. Proof. Real proof. Maria looked at me with tears in her eyes. "This could save you." "Not just me," I murmured. "It will destroy them." For the first time in months, I felt power surge through me. Faint, fleeting, but real. A spark against the darkness. They thought they owned me. But I had stolen their own voices, turned them into weapons. The next morning, the phone rang again. Mr. Caldwell's voice was steady, almost grave. "Margaret, the DNA results are ready. I'll bring them to you myself." My breath caught. The truth, finally the truth, was coming. I stared at the window, the pale morning light spilling across the floorboards. Outside, the world moved as usual, cars passing, children laughing on their way to school. But for me, everything was about to change. "Bring them," I whispered, "and hurry." As I hung up, I pressed a hand to my chest. My heart felt frail but alive. For the first time in years, I drew a full breath and thought, I might just outlive their greed long enough to bury it. The knock at the door came late in the afternoon. My heart raced in my frail chest. "Margaret," Mr. Caldwell said, stepping inside. His face was grave, almost hesitant. "I have the DNA results." The children were all in the living room arguing over petty things, unaware of the storm about to hit. I motioned for him to sit beside me. He placed the envelope in my trembling hands. The paper felt heavier than any weight I had ever carried. "Open it," he said softly, "but be prepared." I inhaled slowly, my fingers shaking as I tore the seal. Line by line, the truth etched itself into my mind. My sons, Richard, Thomas, David, were not my biological children. Not one. My stomach lurched, my chest constricted. Years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, love poured into them, and yet none of it had been mine by blood. But the rage, the betrayal, the injustice, they were mine. And now they were weaponized. I didn't speak immediately. Instead, I stood, holding the envelope like a detonator. "Mom, what are you doing?" Richard demanded, his eyes narrowing. I let my gaze drift slowly across the room, taking in each one of them. Their wives stiffened, sensing something had shifted. "You've all been greedy, cruel, blind to decency," I said, my voice quiet but cutting. "You wanted my house, my money, my last days, but you were living a lie. A lie that has now been exposed." Richard stepped forward. "What are you talking about?" I dropped the envelope onto the coffee table, the papers sliding across the polished wood. "Your DNA tests," I said, letting the words sink like stones. "You are not my sons." The room froze. Denise's jaw dropped. Lillian gasped. Sandra's face paled. You're lying," Thomas stammered. I shook my head slowly. "No, the law and science do not lie. The blood doesn't lie. You've spent your lives pretending, and now, the truth is here." A silence so thick it felt like a weight pressed against the walls. Richard's face twisted with rage. "This is impossible." "It's very possible," I said, "and your greed has blinded you to every ounce of respect and decency." Sandra screamed. "You tricked us? You can't do this." "You already tricked yourselves," I shot back. "Believing love could hide your cruelty." Denise grabbed Richard's arm. "We need to call a lawyer. This can't be valid." I leaned back, weary but alive, and smiled faintly. Call anyone you like. You can scream, you can fight, but the fact remains you are strangers wearing my son's faces. And everything you thought you owned, everything you coveted, it belongs to me. All of it. Their voices rose in chaos, screaming, pleading, threats flying. I listened quietly, my hands clasped around the recorder. Every word of their fury captured, every ounce of their betrayal documented. And for the first time in decades, I felt free. I didn't need to raise a hand. The law, the truth, and the recordings did the work. Mr. Caldwell had already arranged for the evidence to be delivered discreetly to the courts. The moment the DNA test results went public, the estate was frozen. Not a single dollar or property could be touched. The vultures screamed, threatened, and raged. They couldn't access a cent. And the final sting? The truth became public knowledge. My so-called sons had lied, manipulated, and treated their mother with cruelty. The media caught wind. Even distant relatives who had suspected turned away in disgust. I watched the chaos, chest tight but proud. They had built their own prison and I held the key. I sat by the window that evening, the sun dipping below the horizon. My body was frail, the cancer gnawing at me, but my spirit was alive and roaring. Maria brought tea, placing it gently in my hands. I sipped, savoring the quiet after the storm. They'll recover, she said softly. Eventually. Perhaps, I replied. But they won't forget this. Not ever. The lesson is theirs to carry. I thought of Michael, of the life I had lived with love and sacrifice. Though my blood had not produced these men, my heart had. And that heart, betrayed, wounded, and tested, had triumphed. As night fell, I whispered a quiet prayer, not for mercy but for the satisfaction of justice. They thought they could take everything, I said softly. But they forgot one thing. I am the mother of truth, and truth always finds its way. The house was silent. For the first time in decades it felt like my own, and in that silence I felt victorious.